right. Hello everyone and welcome to our presentation. It's about web components and it's for Java developers, naturally because we are in a Java conference. And my name is Matti Tahvonen.
And I'm Teemu Anttila.
So I work nowadays as a developer advocate at our marketing department. I used to be a real engineer, but now I'm failed. So they moved me aside, and that's why I have Teemu here. So Teemu works. Okay, so you don't have all the fonts, so yeah, maybe our slides might be a bit dizzy, but let's try to go with those. So Teemu is a real engineer, and what are you doing?
I'm basically developing our open source framework and quite a lot of related projects around Spring and CDI integration, for example.
Yeah, and on today's agenda, we will discuss a bit about web components. What kind of standard is it? How many of you have actually Googled web components? What does it mean? Just a couple of hands, so I guess a brief overview of what web components are is very good things to have. And then we will also discuss about our upcoming Vaadin 10, which contains a really nice Java framework to use these web components to build real applications out of those components. So this is like a typical today's single-page web applications where you have lots of components, and this is not actually even bad because it's kind of consistent. There is like same class names all over again, and there is probably some kind of a framework which is used to build this application. But it doesn't really help if there is a developer who needs to start up finding out, okay, there is a bug on this area. What's the file that I need to change? Because the DOM itself doesn't describe the structure of the application. But web components, it will make things much easier because we can define elements, like custom elements. Here we have expenses application, and then we have neon-animated pages and login page. Those are all web components. And also web components, it provides you like a protection from other web components and from bad development practices. So web components, it's a collection of emerging standards, custom elements, shadow DOM, HTML imports, and HTML template. And let's go through all of these and discuss a bit of these, what they mean. So custom elements, it's kind of the mother of these all standards, and it allows you to define custom elements. So most HTML developers or web app developers, they only have these basic input elements, and then they have div element, then span and paragraph. And with web components, you can create your own element. You can use some JavaScript to extend HTML element, as in this case, or then you can extend like a div element or any existing HTML element and build your application or build your web component from that. And then you can define those into your context, and then you can just start using those in your HTML application. Then there is this shadow DOM, which actually provides this protection. So inside a shadow root, for example, CSS, they cannot leak outside from your web components. So if you have been doing a lot of like JavaScript development and used various widgets, you might have spotted out issues that if you take one JavaScript component into your single page web application, then something else breaks on some other part of the web page because CSS anchors, they might leak to another component or like normal HTML structure that you have there. And third one relates to actually reusing these web components. So just with the shadow DOM and custom elements, you can already build those web components. But if you want to share those, then HTML import is pretty nice thing. So you can define your web component in one HTML snippet, and then you can import that into your web application and just start using it. Then HTML template is something that some people like to use, but you don't actually need it. It contains template tag, which is actually just a tag which is not rendered anywhere. And then you can define some structure there. It can also contain like other web components if needed. And then you can use this template inside your application. So in this code snippet, there is this container div, and then there is some JavaScript where we take the template defined earlier and then replicate that template into the element. And these standards are not actually standards yet, they are just working drafts, but the browser support, that actually looks much better. So many of the browsers already support, or let's say Chrome supports everything, but like major browsers also, like other, like Safari, Firefox, Edge, and also IE11, you can use web components there with polyfills. So polyfills are like small JavaScript widgets, which kind of enhance your browser a bit, and then you can use these standards with the API, and everything, at least in theory, everything just works. Of course, using these polyfills, they make your application a bit slower, but at least you can start using these emerging standards today already. And framework support is getting better all the time, so if you, for example, have tried to use web components in old Angular versions, then you could use them, but it didn't bring that much aid for you there. But the latest Angular that has much better support, and in Vaadin Framework, for example, we have an add-on for that, where you can use, like, create custom components for Vaadin using web components. And the next version, which is going to be Vaadin Flow, the Java part of our Vaadin 10, that will have, like, it's natively just using web components. So, in a summary, web components, they provide you encapsulation and information hiding for web. That's probably the best part of web components. So you can actually share those components with different projects without any collisions. Then it also helps a lot to distribute these components and cleans up the DOM. And in general, it helps a lot those people who consume those components, but it's actually not helping too much to build those components. There is actually more things for component developers to think about. And also, it doesn't make web application like it's no silver bullet which makes web platform a good place to write those applications. So we will still need frameworks to build web applications. And it doesn't fix the fact that web is actually not designed for applications, but for documents. Vaadin Elements is a project that we actually started quite many years ago. We were really early with web components, and we have been building these elements for a while, and some of our existing users have been wondering that what the hell are they going to ditch Java completely, because we have been building that primarily for front-end developers who work in the browser. And now with Vaadin 10, we are actually combining these two tracks and starting to be using those components from the Java framework as well. And Elements currently has a lot of components. It contains all the boring components that you need for business applications, and then there are some more advanced ones, and lots of charts, more charts, even more charts, and practically everything that you need to build basic applications, like business applications. And then if you want to go vaadin.com and see the whole listing, I don't want to go through them here, that's not the case here. And one thing more about our Vaadin Elements and other web components, go to this address. There is a lot of web components that you can use with Vaadin Elements today. So if there is something missing from Vaadin Elements, you can still keep using those and pick one component from some other vendor. But I think Teemu is a Java developer mainly. I think web components don't help you too much. Yeah,
not too much.
Yeah,
and time.
That's why we need the Java framework. And before going to that, I'm quite often saying that web is not a good place to make applications, but just to note this or make this more efficient, I'd like to quote this Pete Hunt, who is the guy behind this React framework from Facebook. And he said this in Java a couple of years ago, that web technologies are not designed for documents. If you would be building a UI toolkit, it would look nothing like a DOM. And this is really true. Web is very good for documents, but it's not for dynamic applications. And also, the markup language that we like to use, well, XML is not strictly HTML, but it's pretty much the same crap. So that's why we need those frameworks, and most of the web frameworks, they actually come from the document model, and then they try to somehow enhance that to be a good, like an application platform. But with Vaadin, we have taken like a completely different kind of solution. So we have been coming from the standard UI library side, and we have just adopted that to use web as a rendering engine. And originally, actually, like more than 10 years ago, when we started with Vaadin Framework, then we had an idea that we could actually use multiple rendering technologies. We wouldn't need to stick to web only. We could have like a Swing rendering engine, and then we could have something for the mobile devices. But nowadays, even mobile devices, they are just using the HTML rendering. So we have kind of slipped from that. But still, you can see it when you use Vaadin. So your arrow doesn't work.
Yes, it does.
So Vaadin is all Java, and you are using components. Like in Java, you will instantiate new components, you will compose new components from existing components, and it's almost like working with Swing or SVT, and much closer to that when compared to like using standard request-based web application frameworks, or any single-page web application frameworks either. And it has a really strong abstraction of the whole client-server model. So this is maybe like the most significant feature in Vaadin Framework. Wiget, for example, has quite similar model, but still there you will see the page changes, and you will need to think about how the communication works a bit. In Vaadin, that's like completely transparent. And most often you will kind of forget that you are building a web application. You are just building a UI, and then Vaadin will take care of all the communication, and no need to expose any REST services or anything. And often those developers who come from standard UI framework, they will feel like really much like home when they start to use Vaadin.
I don't remember how many times I have heard today. So this is like Swing, right?
Yeah, it's like Swing, but you will get an awesome web applications of it. We actually started really long time ago. The company was founded like 2001, and the first open source product was released 2002. And since then, we have been developing all the time. As the web has been developing, there was this kind of Ajax revolution. Then we switched from server-side rendering. So we used to be pretty much like JSF, but of course with the Java API. But we did all the rendering on the server side, and when somebody reacted with the UI, then it went back to the server, rendered a new HTML page, gave that to the user. But at that point, Vaadin applications really became like much more usable. Since then, we have been upgrading the client side a couple of times, moving from plain JavaScript to Google Web Toolkit-based rendering, and then we have implemented server-side push using WebSockets and a lot of different kind of advances. And now we are making the next big change by incorporating these Vaadin elements to Vaadin 10. And Vaadin 10, it's open source. Like the core of it is open source. Elements is Avast 2 license, and the Java framework, Vaadin Flow, that's also Avast 2 license. And then we need to pay Teemu's salary. So we have some commercial tooling there, and then we have some commercial like starter packages, and then we provide services for Vaadin users. And that's how we actually finance the most significant part of Vaadin platform. We always try to make usability like a super good, and also that includes developer usability. So we want to make development with Vaadin as smooth as possible and as efficient as possible. And we do that even by sacrificing like performance or server-side memory consumption. So we want to make you to build applications as fast as possible and make those applications as good as possible. And we do that by this component-based abstraction. So let's see how Vaadin 10 works. So Teemu, would you suggest our users to use this kind of code?
No.
Yes. So this is actually like the really low-level usage that you can do now with Vaadin 10. So there is now wrappers for all elements. So you can create input element, or you can create button element, and then you can just set the attributes there, add event listeners, and then you can also synchronize property like there, which kind of lets Vaadin Flow know that this property should be changed from the server side, not from the client side to the server side, and vice versa. So if we update the value from the server side API, it goes to the client, and the other way around. And this is what you can use when you build new components, like really low-level components. And for example, if you have a web component, it's element like just normal input element from Flow side. So that's why Vaadin Flow actually, it doesn't provide any special support for web components, but it provides support for elements, and that's basically enough. Let's look about then a bit more advanced example. So here we have a Google Map web component. So Google is the main developer here in the web components area, and so they have Google Map also as a web component. So you can just define the tag in your web application, and then you can make it visible. And here we are letting Vaadin Flow know that this trip map should be using Google Map tag name on the client side. Then we also do the HTML import for the actual Google Map component, and then we can just set properties that we want to use there. And then from the Java side, its usage becomes like really simple. You just instantiate the component, and then call some Java for it. Yeah. And this is actually one component that you will be using soon.
Soonish.
In the.
So I'm not just going to stand here for the whole presentation and just actually do something.
So we are going to do something really, really stupid. So I've seen quite a lot of live coding examples here in Devoxx, and lots of them has failed, and we will probably fail as well because we are using developer preview version of our product. And we are going to build an application called Trippy, and it contains a listing of trips, and then it contains a visualization. So if you select any of these rows on the table, then it will show it on the map. And also, it's built like, you can talk more about this.
I can talk more about this, yeah. So let's take a quick look. So in here, we have the basic main layout. So we always want to have the Google Map shown. In every single view of the application, we want to show the map, because the map is quite important when you are visualizing your car trips from location to another location. Then we are going to have a table that is going to list everything that we have. So the old one we used to have, this piece over here, it kind of had some automatically generated test data in the US, so I had to change it a bit, of course, because we are not in the US. We are in a much nicer place.
And then this trip list also contains a button there.
Yes.
And so that button can be used to create new trips. And then when we click that button, it goes to a view where there is more input elements. So there is text fields, from, where, and date field, and then a save button. And when you click that, it goes to the server, and it saves actually to a Spring Boot-based database.
Yes.
And let's build this.
Okay.
But of course, we will be cheating. So for example, this Google Map component that we showed earlier, this is already in the project.
But now we are having a problem, as this thing over here is not so easy to see. So let's see if we can scale it a bit. I think we cannot scale it.
You can. Let me do that for you. Okay.
Everything works. Just small demo effect. Yeah, that looks much bigger already. So, can you see the code over here? I hope so. Okay. So, first off, we have the main layout. I'm cheating a bit. I already have basically all the classes in place, but the implementations are more or less missing. So this is something we're going to use as the basic layout for every single page. It is defined to be a router layout, so I can use it when I'm navigating from page to page, like the base layout for every page.
Yeah, and this is extending the most simple component available, so it's called division. So it's basically the div element in the UI, and there we are adding this trip map, which is a singleton here for like a, or not a singleton, but
basically a UI scoped
thingy that you add there.
Yeah. And we also have a style sheet that contains not so much CSS, but it's like a basic setup for the application. But let's take a look at what it looks like over here. So Google Maps is loading, and there I can actually see there's Antwerp. Nice. I can zoom in a bit. Where's Kinepolis? Over there. Nice. So this seems to be pretty much working already. But as I can see, I don't have the table listing and I don't have the buttons over there, so let's take a look at the trip list.
Yeah, and this is actually much more interesting component in general because it contains this route annotation. So this is actually the view, the main view. We have the route, so this maps this view into the servers or servlets route.
Yeah.
And whenever a user comes here without any parameters in the URL, it loads this default view. And this is also a managed bean by default. So we can use AutoWired there. So this is a Spring Boot application. And the trip repository is just a JPA repository that we have there to store the trips.
So let's try to get something on the screen. So I have the grid component over there. I want some items in there. Repository, find all. And I think we want to sort them by descending date. So the newest ones are going to be on the top and the old ones are going to be on the bottom.
Yeah, and this grid component, this comes from the Vaadin elements, but it also has this Java API, which we have automatically created based on the web component API.
So we're going to add a couple of columns here. Basically, we want to show like what day, then we had like where do we start from, and where are we actually going. Like this, and then I want to add it to the UI. Like that. Let's see, oh, one class reloaded. So it should, oh, look at it, it's in the wrong place.
Yeah, so by default we don't say any size for this. We could use sizing API, so we could set the set width there, but I think you can also add a style name for it, or CSS class name.
I think we had something pre-configured there. I guess it was trip list, maybe. Let's see.
So now the CSS that we have prepared before hooks into the web component and it sizes it a bit smaller, and we can actually see the map as well.
But it's still not actually showing anything because I don't do anything with the grid.
Yeah, so the next step would be to kind of add a click listener to the grid, and then from the click listener we can take the selected trip and give it to the map component and tell it to visualize this route or trip.
Okay, so I'm going to add a value change listener here. It's going to call. Actually, now that we are here, should we actually make it so that for each trip there's like a unique URL for it?
Yeah, we could do that. You could really easily just call, what was it?
Yeah, I had this navigate to helper that I need to do.
Yeah, you could directly go to the map and set the trip there, but that would kind of break the experience for end users. And this is where we need to think about the web a bit. So if user would just select one row there in the application, and then he would like to send this direct link to his friend with like a Slack or Skype, then that link wouldn't actually go to the place where the user expected. So if user copies a URL from the browser, he kind of expects that the one who receives that URL gets exactly the same view. So that's why we need to use a special router API here and use the navigate to method there, and we will give there a parameter, which is the trip, and then we will use the trip's ID from the database as a kind of a qualifier for the URL, and then we will use the navigate to method to go to this URL.
Yeah. And now it is almost there. So now we just need to manage how do we change the display when the ID is set. So if the ID doesn't exist, then I don't want to show anything. So by default, my trip will be null.
Yeah, in many business applications, there are lots of views where you do not actually need this kind of deep linking, but for this demo, we wanted to show that it's also pretty easy to tackle with Vaadin as well.
So I want the grid to show the selection there, like that, and I want my map to actually show the trip itself.
Yeah.
And
now you will probably get an eternal loop, so make there one more add to the click listener.
So I don't want to navigate if this change is not coming from the client.
Yeah, so basically if there is now a new user who comes with the direct URL, it will also call this value change listener in the grid. So in that case, we don't actually want to do the same thing again and again and again.
Yeah, let's see. One class reloaded again.
So we only want to react to the value change listeners if they come from the client directly. So now,
let's see.
Now if you click there, it should visualize the route.
So let's go from Amsterdam to Antwerp.
Yeah, and now if you look to the address bar, you can see that there is this 10, which is the identifier of this trip. And now if you just reload the page or open it in a new tab, you automatically get to this page, even though it was not anymore in the same state, in the same single page state that it used to be.
The scrolling of the table was kind of off, but
that
was basically the only problem. So if I would manually go to trip number 5,
that works as well.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to the next step.
So we wanted to. We need the router link to add the new trip.
Yeah, so we want to have the functionality add new routes as well, and we already have this class for new, like filling in new routes, and it was called a router link. It's called add trip view. But then we will use this router link, which is standard HTML anchor element. So it's basically a normal link, but it's actually doing the navigation a bit more efficiently than normal link would do, because it doesn't reload the whole page. So if you would use just standard anchor element, it would actually make a page refresh on the client side. But now that we are using this router link, which is a special component in or extension of anchor element in Vaadin Flow, it will make the navigation on the server side, and then it will only render the changed parts of the view. So basically with this router link, if you go now to the browser, and if you now click the new plus button that you added there, it doesn't render the whole page, but it just swaps the listing into this add new route form.
Yeah. And let's take a look at the add trip class that we have over here. So you noticed most likely that there was already content there, because this is actually using a Polymer template. Yeah. So in Vaadin, actually earlier in the presentation, I used quotation marks when I was in all Java. It's all Java only if you want to do it all in Java. So many teams nowadays have like a special front-end developers as well. But with Vaadin Flow, you can use those templates that these guys create, and you can use those with your Vaadin application as well. And this is kind of an example of that kind of a design. Could you open the HTML file that has this theme? So basically, we have the HTML import that defines that we have this trip formed HTML file that contains the actual code.
Yeah.
And in here we have a bunch of extra imports because we kind of need some stuff from.
So basically we are using other web components here in this template. And if you scroll down, there is some styles which is related to this view only. And then there are the actual components. So we have labels and Vaadin text fields, just like we actually defined in. Did we have some example? I think we did. So just like you would define from the Java code, but you can define it here in the XML if you like to, but you don't need to. And then we can hook the actual business logic to this view in the Java class.
So we have these IDs for some of the elements, and these IDs basically we want to map them. I'm cheating again. Don't look at me.
Yeah, we were supposed to be using Spring tools, dev tools here, but it still doesn't work with this new version, this new developer preview, so we needed to use just the debug mode to make this presentation a bit smoother. So that's why the fields were there previously.
So basically this tells the Vaadin, the flow, that in the template over there are these 4 fields that I'm interested in, and it will basically map these Java objects that I'm going to have here, kind of auto-wired, into those corresponding objects
defined in the HTML template. Yeah, so in this trip we are going to use the data binding, which is actually one of the reasons why you would like to use this kind of a server-side framework. So we can pretty easily bind the business object. This is just JPA entity in this case, but you could use, of course, DTO if you would like to limit the scope there. So binder is the tool that we can use to bind the properties from Java object to the input fields in this UI.
So practically we can do binder to bind. So from is the starting point.
And then you can define getters or setters there. Or then you can also define it with the reflection, so you can maybe use that for the 2 fields. So here.
Yeah.
Start.
Well, this is supposed to be the end. Yeah. And the last one was date.
And then also you can use completely name-based binding, so you can just take in all the properties from the trip entity and bind those automatically to the names found in this place, but this is a bit more safer this way. And now we created a new business object, so we are going to only add new trips here, and we bind that JPA entity to these fields.
As well, you could use this actually to edit one of those already existing trips. Instead of calling a new trip, you would get the trip instance from somewhere and just put it to the binder, and it would update the values of the components from that trip, and then you could modify them and then save it later. And I guess because this is kind of boring, if nothing happens on the screen, I'm just going to add a quick value change listener here. So whenever someone goes and modifies the values
of any of the fields there,
I want to preview the trip with the from and to. And actually, since we're coming to a new UI here, I kind of want to clear the trip that it's currently showing, just so that I don't have anything extra on the screen.
All right.
That should be
most
of it anyway, right?
So then the browser.
Hot swap failed.
Okay, restart.
Well, it's going to take a moment. My laptop is a potato. Yeah, I need to get a new one. This 2013 MacBook Pro is starting to slow down really badly.
Yeah, you could actually start typing the actual saving to the database as well.
Yeah, I'm just gonna quickly do here. So a bit later, when I'm gonna hopefully not restart the server again, but like just, debug, reload stuff. I want that whenever the user clicks the save button, I want to, now I'm gonna use the ugly hack that we have here. Navigate to.
And you probably want to save it to the
repository I want to
first.
Store it to the repository, and the returning object should have a ID, a permanent one.
Yeah.
But let's take a look. So right now it should work more or less. So we can start a trip from.
Go from Antwerp to Turku because I want to go home.
Yeah, me too. I want to go home. So we are going on a Friday, right?
Okay, so there you could see the preview. So now it still haven't, Teemu still didn't click the save button. So it just previewed this route. And now if we click save.
I didn't compile it yet.
Okay.
So let's do compile it like this. One class is reloaded. Nice. So now we can actually save our trip to Turku. Get back home. Like this.
Yeah. So now we can see it from the listing, and you can see that there is a new ID assigned for it. It seems to be now 1001, and it went all the way to the back to the database just from the Java code. And this is the thing that makes you really efficient with Vaadin. You can directly connect with your backend. You don't need to think about any client-server communication at all in Java.
Yeah. And
of course, if you have some REST services, then you can use those from Java. But it's actually easier to use REST services from Java than from browser because you don't have any cross-domain restrictions at all.
No cross-domain problems. Yeah. And actually, with the way that this is working, so if I have some sensitive information, for example, in a person bean, I can not send that information to the client side at all.
Yeah.
If I don't
so the development model also like it makes you more secure by default as well. Yeah. So this is pretty much all that we already talked during the theming. So Vaadin doesn't provide any kind of abstraction for the Java users for the theming, but you can just use pure CSS. And then we also have pretty good helpers for you to create like custom themes. So we had also like a previous version of this built with SAS, so which is syntactically awesome style sheet, and there you can just provide some variables, and then it will automatically give you the new style sheet based on these variables, and then you don't need to configure or theme each and every component separately, but you can just declare some colors, some metrics, and then you will get the theme that you want. And this is now using more modern JavaScript techniques that I have no idea of. I have lost my... I used to be the only JavaScript developer in our company, but I have no idea of this new CSS stuff anymore.
We had a presentation about that in the company, but I guess you were eating some pea soup that day and didn't join us.
We need to have some traditions. I'm always going for pea soup on Thursdays. So this is a small video where we are changing these variables directly, and there you can see the changes that happen on the UI. There are two built-in themes, so there is the Valo one that you can easily customize, and then we also have like a material design theme available for all the components. But that's not that easily customizable. The aim there is just that if you happen to be using Google's material, what's the web component called?
I don't remember the name.
They have this, what is this? Material button?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and then they have fields which look like the material design, and you can use mix these components with the Google's ones. So, as I said, we are currently in the developer preview with this Vaadin 10. You can come to our booth to see it, how it works, and try it out, and then you can get this kind of a cool T-shirt. And the sources for this component or this exercise is available in the GitHub, but consider it to be really developer preview, so don't make your applications based on that. We have actually better solutions for that. So we have this bakery app starter, and then we have a beverage buddy starter the bakery one that contains all of our tooling, including the commercial ones, and this brewery, that example application contains only the open source components, so you can get started completely free. And these are like much better starting points for your own applications. And Vaadin components, they are all designed also for mobile usage, so you can build pretty awesome like mobile applications as well with Vaadin Framework and Vaadin Flow. This is like this is the bakery application that we have there. It contains basically all the components that we have, like the basic business components. Then it contains some of those charting things as well, I think. I'm not sure if they are covered in this video.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that on the dashboard there's going to be a couple of charts
Yeah.
visible over there, and I guess this is also using the board for like layouting. And so
Yeah, so the board is one of those commercial components that contains like a responsive design component where you can just place your component and give them some parameters, and then they will be displayed respecting the screen size of your end user. So all that is available for you from vaadin.com. Go there. We like to help developers to build web applications that user loves. That's our motto. Thank you. So I guess there are some Vaadin Framework users here as well available. Yeah, couple of users who have been using Vaadin Framework before. I guess at least you might have some kind of questions. This new web component that has raised quite a lot of concerns amongst our users. So how do you feel about this? Do you have any questions? Yeah, there.
How would it look like if I take any web component and I would need a Java class that I could use in Vaadin?
So the question was, how would it look like if you would take any kind of random web component and you would like to use it with Vaadin? You can do that already today, actually, with this one add-on that I mentioned with Vaadin Framework, but it will be much more easier with the next Vaadin 10 and with Vaadin Flow. So there we have a tool which automatically takes the properties from the web component and automatically generates the API for it. I could actually show the one slide there earlier about the Google Map component.
there.
Here. So this is how you can do it manually.
Yeah.
So you can define the API manually and use the properties just there. Previously, you needed to create like a Google Web Toolkit component to do this, but now you can just use the Java API on the server side to modify the DOM. So doing components is actually much more easier in Vaadin 10. But then you can use this tooling, this automatically tooling, which creates your Java API automatically. And we are actually using that in our own components as well. And then for certain components, like for Vaadin Grid, we make some enhancements for it because we want to kind of customize the JavaScript API because it doesn't necessarily match perfectly for the server-side Java API that we want to use. Did that answer to your question? Yep. Okay. Any other questions? Yep.
What about testing the UI?
What about testing the UI? Yeah. That kind of depends on what you want to test. One option is to use MVP pattern, and there you will separate the kind of the business logic of the UI layer to one class, and then you can create unit tests for that. You can use JUnit, and those tests are like really fast to execute. But that's going to be hard as well, because then you probably use Java EE or Spring, and then you have managed beans, and then you will need to use some other tooling there to wire it all together. And that's why I often suggest to use also like real integration tests, which test your application using browser. So you can use Selenium, basic Selenium, and then we also have a commercial tool called Vaadin test bench, which is basically additions to Seleniums. It contains like a Vaadin specific selector library, so you can use Java API, which contains all the component implementations, and you can, for example, select one single row from the grid much more easier than to go to do the same thing with XPath or some other selectors that are available in the standard Selenium. And also that contains small helpers that will actually know a little bit how the communication works between Vaadin's client side and the server side. And this makes certain tests much more easier because you don't need to do the things that you typically do with single-page web application testing using Selenium. Then you will have to think when the browser is actually ready rendering the response from the server, for example. So in many cases, you will need to write codes that wait for this element to be present, or then you will just need to use random timeouts in certain places. And most often with Vaadin test bench, you don't need to do that. So it really helps to write this kind of browser level tests.
More questions?
More questions? We still have 3 minutes. Okay, yeah.
You're just saying that Angular 2 further integrates well with web components, right?
Yeah.
They work together.
Yeah, they basically make the changes so that now if you, I haven't used Angular that much, but now if you use Angular to bind some property, you can do it directly to the web components property. And it works natively with the web components as well. So it should be much easier. If you go to, it's called, can you go with browser to custom elements everywhere?
Custom elements everywhere.
Yeah, this web page actually contains the status of how web components works and with different things. And this latest Angular version, Angular 4, that actually got like 30 points. So because Angular is also built by Google, so I guess they got some kind of a mighty call from the upper management that you need to make it work with web components as well. So they are kind of competing with Polymer team and Angular team inside Google, but they also cooperate, and now latest Angular works really well with the web components that are typically built with Polymer. And I think I didn't actually mention that we are also using Polymer quite a lot. So most of the components that we built inside the Vaadin Elements project, we are using Polymer there to do the heavy lifting, because if you would be writing everything by like manually with JavaScript, it would be much more effort than by using Polymer. So Polymer contains like data binding for the client-side stuff, like bit like that we had there in the Java side. Okay, any other questions? 1.5 minutes time. Yeah, so we will be staying still tomorrow at our booth. We have still a couple of hundred t-shirts. You can come there and try out Vaadin, and you can get this funny t-shirt, and we will be answering there to even trickier questions if you have such. Thank you.